Alright guys, time to get this 5.7 Hemi Challenger running. But I want to make up a quick harness for it. This one, engine harness is already installed with the engine harness I always use, which is that one. You can find them in Chargers, Challengers, just early up to 2010, I would guess. But this is what I look for when I'm in the junkyard, okay? So remember, this is the one with the C100 connector, which is this guy. And then you're only gonna have to make up your shorty wiring harness like this. And the length is all dependent on where you wanna put your computer. All right, so with this project, I already cut a hole so that my orange connector would fit through the firewall. I just kept nibbling away at the hole because, just like in the CUDA over there, my PCM is under the passenger side footwell over there, okay? So the hole comes in over there by the gas pedal, where I had my other EFI wiring harness, and then it's got to reach over here somewhere. So since that orange connector is so big, this is the size of the hole you have to make, because all this stays on the engine side and that has to go through to the passenger side. I don't know if you can see it. We'll show that later. But so now I have to make my wiring harness for this car, and we're gonna do it with my stand. So this engine harness, which is the duplicate of that harness, is going on the engine, and then I'm gonna recreate another one of these harnesses that's nice and neat, so my ODB2 can reach the dashboard, so I can plug that in while I'm sitting in the driver's seat. All the relays go underneath close to the PCM, and that connector has to have long enough wires to go from, oh, I forgot to say, that PC100 is also in the car. So the hole has to be able to take the orange connector and then this one. Doesn't matter which one goes first, as long as your hole is big enough to fit both of these through there, one at a time. We're gonna hook this up. Gonna make another one of these once I get all the lengths measured, but I have to make sure that runs. This is these circuit breakers I use between the alternator and the battery. This one's 150 amp, and the wire that comes with it already goes to the alternator. It used to come from the starter. Used to go to the starter on the charger. So since it gets to the middle of my firewall, I put a circuit breaker on it, and then I drill a hole in the connector so that I can hook it onto one side of the breaker, and then the battery is going to go to the other side, because I still run the battery in the stock location over there. So that's a good use of that wire that's already there, and that wire runs down here to the alternator, and that's factory on the charger. All right, so let's get this hooked up, and then I'll start making up another one of these. All right, so let's get this together. I don't know if I showed this. I've got a flexible neck thermostat housing I put in. Had to open up the holes a little bit to get everything lined up, because it's a typical Chevy mount, but I got to work. I'm making the holes a little bit wider down here. screws that came with it were inset. They actually went inside this a little bit, halfway down. So I had to use these. And then it swivels so that I could rotate it to fit this hose that I found at O'Reilly's. I think I went through their hoses and just found one that looked like it would work. But this actually had a weird, it had more hose to it, but I just found one that I could cut off and use. In case you have this is the eBay radiator that came with the fans. I think it was $250. Radiator and fans. But yeah, big block style, because I want the inlet over here on this side and the outlet on the opposite side, because I've used that long hose that goes all the way across for the bottom. So that's why I always use the big block style radiators, where the inlet is on the passenger side and the driver's side is the outlet where it sucks into the water pump. Boy, these wiring harnesses are so easy to hook up because everything is where it should be. Even the little hold downs. You know, where something's capturing, you know, your wiring harness. So I wanted to point this out. When I bought this harness, sometimes your cam sensor and your crank sensor might be different between certain engines, whether it's a 5.7, 6.2, 6.4. This is a 6.1. 5.7s might be different. But boy, what I do is when I buy the wiring harness, look at that, I get the sensors that come with it. Because what if you get home and your engine has a different crank sensor on it, or cam sensor? Because I've had to switch these out. I've had to switch these out between some of my wiring harnesses and engines, just so I can do testing. So it helps to have as many different kinds as you can. Or hell, you're not going to be charged much more for a sensor when you're buying the whole wiring harness anyway. I also get the air inlet temperature sensor, which I have on that other wiring harness right now, just so you have everything. You know, what's it going to care? What's it going to matter? How much is the price going to increase? Now, if you get a throttle body, you know, that's obvious. They're going to charge you for that throttle body. But if I'm walking out of the junkyard with this whole harness and there's, you know, a couple sensors still on there. Look at this guy. A couple sensors still on the end of your wiring harness. They're not going to nickel and dime you for every little single piece that you still have attached. When, you know, it looks like it could be part of the harness. Who knows, whatever. You could probably even get your knock sensors, which plug onto those. You know, get as many things as you can. Just like this. This is a map sensor on a 6.1. And on a 5.7, what if your map sensor is a little bit different and you don't have one? Or your connector on your wiring harness isn't the same. Let's see if this one happens to plug in, if I'm lucky there. I don't have to change the map sensor. See, that plugs in, so I got lucky. And your capacitors. I have two different style capacitors here, like an old and a new. Make sure you get those off your junkyard engine. That whole car might be scrapped in a day or two, where if you run back to the junkyard, it may be gone. It might be flat as a pancake. So if you're gonna pull this whole wiring harness, get as many sensors as you can. I said on my other video, I don't know if I posted a video or I just sent some pictures up to the swap page. When I pulled this engine harness off of a charger in the junkyard, I got to the point where they were closing in a couple hours. I just started pulling as much as I could. I think I even pulled the heads off. I got every little part I might need. One thing about this I think this is the oil temperature sensor, and then there's an oil pressure sensor that goes down here behind the alternator. For some reason, I had to cut that on the other wiring harness I got because I could not get it off of the engine without a lot of disassembly. So on here I already have the other type sensor for my rally gauge in an E-body. So there's a pressure sensor that goes in there. There's a wire running down to that sensor and I could not get it pulled out. So I just cut it, undid the wire, and then, you know, soldered it back together and shrink wrapped it. But that was the only one I couldn't get to when I was pulling one of these harnesses out. So I'm just letting you know that and telling you get as many sensors as you can for your swap that go with your engine wiring harness. But I wanted to show this is the easy one to grab because everything's just about ready to go. And everything's all laid out. And you just make your little shorty wiring harness and then you're running. You don't have to, you know, strip out all these extra wires and pull out transmission wires. This is a 2006 to 2010 Charger. They went all the way up to 9 and 10 also because the 6.1s came on the SRTs. So they all use the same computer before they started switching everything over, I think in 11. All right, stay tuned. Here are the two connectors that I pushed to the firewall. The hole I had to make a little bit bigger that I have by the gas pedal. Like I said before, the only place you can really pass anything through this firewall is right by the gas pedal, because then you have your little hump for your drainage by the windshield wiper cowl. So there's the hole I had to make. I just had to make it a little bit bigger until this orange connector fit through it. All right, and also the C100 connector has to fit through it. So I'll have to close up that hole, seal it up a little bit, because once this wiring harness was in, I no longer need that hole. Okay, so the computer is going to go probably underneath the console, because this is long enough to reach the PCM, which could go right here in front of the shifter. On my other swap, the CUDA, the PCM is hidden underneath this right here because it's too fat to go underneath this kick panel. So it's just kind of underneath the carpet here, but it's not outside in the engine compartment. It's in here with me, just like all my other computers. So, ground wire, orange connector, and C100 connector. So, here's my PCM. I think it was $75, or I got it off eBay. But I plugged my reader into it. It's from a 2007 Charger 300 Magnum Grand Voyager, okay? So this is a 5.7 PCM. It reads and writes. Probably have to use my HP tuners to take off the skim. And then on my other video, or all the pictures I took when I found the Charger in the junkyard, I just started cutting wiring harnesses open and the fuse block, just so I could get as much wire as I could off this black and white connector. So almost everything I need is right here, except for the ODB2, which is way inside the, the cabin of that Charger. But look at all the wires I have. These are your CAN wires. But here's my C100 connector. I started hooking up some relays. Almost everything I need is right here. So I'm gonna modify this just so that everything reaches whatever I'm gonna run it to. Mainly, you know, your brown and blue wires for your ballast resistor, if you hook those together, then you can supply the switch 12 volts that's constantly on every time the key is on or in the start position. So I'm going to be running that to the switch 12 volts. I think it's a pink wire, and then the hot wires are going to be coming right off the battery, like I do a lot of my EFI wiring. All right, everything's plugged in. Looks like it might fit perfectly underneath the console. Gonna have to trial fit that, but I've got the connectors plugged in. Still enough room for my gas pedal because everything's still loose before it's tied up. But the wires are all here. These are going to be for my O2B2 reader, which will probably be mounted underneath the dash up here. So got my 12 volt wires, switch 12 volts, ASD relay and fuel pump relay sit right next to the PCM. I just have to get the gas pedal connector wired in. Once I figure out where I'm gonna mount the gas pedal like I did on the CUDA. I had to make its own custom bracket. But everything has to be shortened up here once I get the lengths figured out. But doesn't look bad. Remember, you gotta get those two main connectors in from your engine harness, and then we'll go from there. All right, let me get this thing shortened up. So I've also have my two gas pedals. This was off of a Challenger, but it's got that angle bracket on it, which I take off. And I also found this Patriot or Jeep Liberty gas pedal, which is a little bit shorter, and it doesn't have the bend. This one's straight down compared to the Charger gas pedal. But one thing about this little one, like I said in my other video, its connector, the wires are different. So it has the same signals as the other ones, but I've got to check all the signals on this pedal because the wires are different for the apps 1, apps 2, and the signal for apps 1 signal, apps 2 signal, and the 5 volts. So I need to figure out, this was the connector that came off this junkyard pedal. I need to figure out how to make this work if I'm going to use the smaller pedal or just make the other pedal work with a small connector, because I have those connectors. And here's my connector. Remember, when you're in the junkyard, just chop out as much as you can because you're going to need it. Alright, let's go on. I thought I might want to try this other pedal, but I might just stick with a universal, so you can just go to a Challenger or Charger and get a working pedal with a part number that works without having to guess that I rewired an end so that I could use this other gas pedal, which might be harder to replace if you don't have the part number. See, that's simple. So we'll decide. But I've got a pedal connector ready to go. And just have to figure out which pedal I'm going to use.